Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's talk about shame. Yes, that squirmy, sticky feeling we don't like to name but know all too well. Especially as women, shame feels like an unwelcome shadow, looming, unshakable, and oddly familiar. But here's the thing, shame thrives in silence. So today we're going to shine a big, bold light on it. Welcome to the adventures, where Zoe is sharing her courage with you and the world around her. Women often find themselves trapped in the relentless pursuit of perfection, a pursuit that feels less like ambition and more like survival. It's not just about excelling. It's about avoiding the unbearable sting of judgment, criticism, or rejection. The world tells us to be everything, everywhere, all at once. A flawless professional, an ever-patient mother, a supportive partner, a loyal friend, and even a picture of effortless self-care. The message is clear: if you falter in any area, you've failed entirely. Shame latches onto this narrative with a vice grip, whispering that we are only as valuable as our ability to meet these impossible standards. And so, we hustle for worthiness. We overachieve, overextend, and overcommit, thinking that if we can just check every box, we'll silence that inner critic telling us we're not enough. But here's the trap. Perfectionism doesn't protect us from shame, it fuels it. The very act of chasing perfection reinforces the idea that we are fundamentally flawed and in need of fixing. Every slip, mistake, or unmet expectation becomes proof that shame was right all along. Instead of celebrating progress, we magnify our shortcomings. Instead of seeking connection, we isolate ourselves, fearing exposure. Even when we achieve something extraordinary, shame doesn't let us rest. It raises the bar. You succeeded this time, it says, but can you keep it up? What happens if you fail next time? What will people think? Perfectionism becomes an exhausting cycle that demands everything but gives nothing in return. The saddest irony is that perfectionism robs us of authenticity. In our quest to be everything to everyone, we lose sight of who we are. We silence our true selves, fearing they're too messy, too imperfect, or too unworthy. But the truth is, the very qualities we try to hide, our vulnerability, our humanity, our flaws, are what make us relatable, lovable, and real. Perfectionism may feel like armor, but it's actually a cage. And the key to breaking free isn't achieving more. It's daring to embrace imperfection. It's realizing that our worth isn't tied to what we do, how we look, or how perfectly we perform. True courage lies in showing up as we are, imperfections and all, and letting go of the myth that we must be flawless to be worthy of love and belonging. Shame doesn't speak in fleeting moments or vague impressions. It speaks in scripts, deeply embedded narratives that loop in our minds. These scripts are like old, worn-out stories we didn't write, but somehow ended up carrying. For many women, these scripts are familiar and predictable, as if they've been passed down generation after generation, shaping how we see ourselves and our place in the world. The words in these scripts are harsh, unforgiving, and insistent. They tell us we're too much or not enough, too loud, too quiet, too ambitious, too passive, too bold, too meek. Shame doesn't settle for one message. It floods us with contradictory demands, ensuring that no matter what we do, we'll feel inadequate. It convinces us that if we deviate from the script, we'll be judged, rejected, or even unloved. What's insidious about shame is how personal it feels. Even though these scripts are often a reflection of societal and cultural expectations, not our own truths, they've been shaped by media, tradition, and the relentless pressures of conformity. When shame says, you should look a certain way, It's echoing a beauty standard that was never realistic to begin with. When it says you should be able to balance everything flawlessly, it's reinforcing the myth of the superwoman, a myth designed to make us feel small. These scripts often begin early. Think back to when you first heard phrases like, good girls don't act that way, or that's not ladylike, or you need to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. These messages might have been well-meaning, but they planted seeds of shame, teaching us to equate our value with how well we could follow the rules. And the scripts grow more complex as we age. Suddenly, it's not just about fitting in, it's about being perfect, successful, desirable, and endlessly selfless, all at the same time. The cruelest part, shame makes the script feel permanent, as if it's the only story we'll ever know. It disguises itself as truth, whispering, this is just who you are. But the reality is, shame's script isn't truth. It's a lie. It's a collection of outdated, unhelpful narratives that no longer serve us, if they ever did. The good news is we are not powerless against shame. We can examine the script, question it, and rewrite it. When shame says, you're not enough, we can respond, enough for whom? Enough for what? When it says, you'll never measure up, we can challenge it by defining our own measures of success, ones rooted in values and authenticity, rather than comparison or approval. Rewriting the script doesn't happen overnight. It takes courage to unlearn the messages we've internalized and replace them with words of self-compassion and truth. But every time we refuse to let shame dictate our story, we take a step toward freedom. We start to hear our own voice, clearer and stronger than shame's. And in that process, we reclaim not only the narrative, but also our sense of worth, purpose, and belonging. Shame's grip may feel powerful, but it's not invincible. It loses its grip when we dare to name it, challenge it, and replace it with a narrative that reflects who we truly are, not who the world tells us we should be. Shame thrives in isolation. It convinces us that we are uniquely flawed, that no one could possibly understand the depth of our inadequacies. It's like a fog that settles over us, whispering that if others truly knew us, the messy, imperfect, unfiltered us, they would turn away. And so we hide. We keep our struggles and fears locked inside, hoping to avoid rejection. But in doing so, we inadvertently feed shame's power. The irony of shame is that the very thing it fears, connection, is also its greatest threat. When we open up and share our vulnerabilities with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame begins to lose its grip. The power of connection lies in its ability to remind us that we are not alone, that imperfection is part of the human experience, and that being seen and loved for who we truly are is possible. This conversation, but connection doesn't come easily when we're in shame's grip. Shame's voice tells us to hide our pain, to wear a mask of perfection, to show only the polished version of ourselves to the world. We fear that revealing our true selves will result in judgment, or worse, rejection. Yet the more we hide, the more isolated we feel, and the deeper shame takes root. It's a self-perpetuating cycle that can leave us feeling trapped and unseen. Breaking free from this cycle requires courage, the courage to let ourselves be seen, flaws and all. It's about choosing vulnerability even when it feels uncomfortable or risky. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's a willingness to say, this is who I am, and I hope you'll accept me anyway. And when we take that leap, something extraordinary happens. We create space for genuine connection. Connection doesn't mean sharing our deepest secrets with everyone we meet. It's about finding those safe, trusted relationships where we can show up authentically. It might be a close friend, a partner, a family member, or even a support group. The key is that these relationships are built on trust, respect, and empathy. In these spaces, we can share our struggles without fear of judgment, and we can receive the understanding and compassion that shame so desperately tries to deny us. Empathy is the heart of connection, and it's the kryptonite to shame. When someone responds to our vulnerability with, "I hear you," or "I've been there too," it's like a lifeline. It reminds us that our struggles don't make us broken. They make us human. Empathy doesn't try to fix or solve. It simply sits with us in our pain and says, "You're not alone." And in that moment, shame's voice starts to fade. Connection also requires self-compassion. Too often we expect others to offer the empathy and understanding we deny ourselves. But self-compassion is a form of connection to our own humanity. It's recognizing that we are worthy of love and belonging, not despite our imperfections, but because of them. When we practice self-compassion, we begin to silence shame's harsh critique and replace it with a kinder, more supportive voice. In the world that often celebrates independence and self-sufficiency, it's easy to forget how deeply we need connection. But connection is not a weakness. It's a fundamental human need. It reminds us that we are part of something larger, that our value isn't tied to our achievements or our ability to hide our flaws, but to our capacity to show up, be seen, and support one another. The antidote to shame is not perfection or isolation. It's connection. It's the messy, imperfect, beautiful act of being human together. When we choose connection, we remind ourselves and each other that we are enough just as we are. And in that space, shame has no place to hide. Shame is a deeply isolating emotion. It thrives in the shadows of secrecy and judgment, convincing us that our flaws, mistakes, or insecurities make us unworthy of love and connection. It tells us that if anyone truly knew the real us, they would turn away. This is where shame derives its power, by silencing us and keeping us trapped in fear of rejection. But there is one force that can strip shame of its power: empathy. Empathy is a simple but profound act of standing with someone in their experience, offering understanding without judgment. It's not about fixing, advising, or solving. It's about listening and saying, "I hear you, I see you, you're not alone." And in those words, shame begins to unravel, because shame's most persistent lie is that we are unworthy of connection. Empathy dismantles that lie by creating connection right in the middle of our vulnerability. When we're drowning in shame, we often believe that our pain or mistakes are unique. Empathy challenges that by normalizing our experiences. Imagine sharing a deeply personal struggle with someone, expecting them to judge or pity you, and instead hearing, "Me too, I've been there." That moment of shared understanding is like a crack of light breaking through the darkness. It reminds us that we're not alone in our humanity, that imperfection is universal, and that we are still deserving of acceptance. Empathy doesn't require us to have identical experiences to someone else. You don't need to have lived through the exact same situation to offer empathy. What matters is the ability to connect with the emotion behind someone's story. If someone shares their fear, grief, or guilt, and you can tap into a time when you felt similar emotions, you've created a bridge of understanding. That bridge is what allows empathy to do its transformative work. But empathy is not always easy. It requires vulnerability, both from the person sharing and the person offering support. When we choose to respond with empathy, we have to set aside our own fears of discomfort, judgment, or inadequacy. We have to resist the urge to minimize someone's pain or rush to make it better. Sometimes the most empathetic response is simply sitting in the discomfort with someone, acknowledging their feelings, and letting them know they're not alone. Taking care is less about empathy isn't just something we offer to others. It's something we must extend to ourselves. Self-empathy or self-compassion is a powerful antidote to shame because it allows us to be kind to ourselves even when we feel unworthy. Too often we reserve our compassion for others while berating ourselves for the same mistakes or vulnerabilities we would forgive in a heartbeat if they belonged to a friend. But self-empathy is what helps us counter shame's internal narrative. It's saying to ourselves, I'm struggling, but that doesn't make me unworthy. Or, I made a mistake, but I'm still deserving of love. Empathy also requires courage because it demands that we let go of judgment, not just of others, but also of ourselves. When we judge someone else's pain or choices, we create distance instead of connection. And when we judge ourselves, we reinforce the shame we're trying to escape. Empathy bridges that gap, reminding us that our worthiness is not tied to perfection, but to our shared humanity. Perhaps one of the most profound aspects of empathy is how it fosters resilience. When we know we're not alone in our struggles, we feel more equipped to face them. Empathy doesn't erase pain, but it lightens the load by reminding us that we don't have to carry it alone. And when we offer empathy to others, we strengthen our own sense of connection and purpose. In the end, empathy kills shame by exposing its lies. It reminds us that we are not defined by our worst moments, that we are not the only ones struggling, and that love and belonging are not rewards for perfection, but birthrights of being human. Every time we choose empathy, whether for ourselves or others, we take a stand against shame. We create a space where vulnerability is met with compassion, where flaws are met with understanding, and where shame has no room to grow. Courage is often misunderstood. Many think it's an inherent quality, something you're either born with or not. Others picture grand, heroic acts, rushing into a burning building, standing up to overwhelming odds. But courage in its most authentic form is far more subtle and universal. It's not about the absence of fear. It's about showing up and taking action despite it. Courage isn't something we possess, it's something we practice. And every act of courage begins with a choice. Shame tries to silence that choice. It tells us to stay small, stay quiet, and avoid risk at all costs. It whispers that stepping forward, especially in vulnerability, will lead to judgment, rejection, or failure. But courage pushes back. Courage says, even if I'm afraid, even if I'm uncertain, I'm going to take this step. And every time we do, we stretch the boundaries of what we believe is possible for ourselves. The practice of courage often starts with small moments, not sweeping gestures. It's raising your hand in a meeting when you're unsure of the answer. It's saying no to something that doesn't align with your values, even when it's uncomfortable. It's admitting when you need help or apologizing when you've made a mistake. These moments may seem ordinary, but they're anything but. They are the foundation of a life lived authentically. Practicing courage requires vulnerability, and that's what makes it so difficult. It means being willing to be seen, flaws and all, without the guarantee of a positive outcome. Vulnerability is uncomfortable because it exposes us to risk, the risk of failure, rejection, or criticism. But vulnerability is also where growth happens. It's where we discover our strength, connect with others, and reclaim our worth. Courage is also deeply intertwined with self-compassion. When we practice courage, we inevitably stumble. We'll have moments where we try and fall short, where we show up and face rejection, where we take a risk and it doesn't pay off. Shame wants us to believe that these moments define us, that failure is proof of our inadequacy. But self-compassion reframes them as stepping stones. It reminds us that courage isn't about being perfect. It's about trying. And every time we try, we build resilience. Courage is contagious. When we see someone else step forward with bravery, especially in vulnerability, it inspires us to do the same. Think about how powerful it is to witness someone sharing their truth, pursuing a dream, or standing up for what they believe in. It reminds us that we too have the capacity for courage. And when we practice courage in our own lives, we create a ripple effect, encouraging those around us to find their own bravery. It's important to acknowledge that courage looks different for everyone. What feels like a small step to one person might feel monumental to another. For someone battling shame, courage might be speaking their truth for the first time. For someone struggling with self-doubt, it might be submitting a job application for a position they don't think they'll get. For someone navigating a personal challenge, it might be simply getting out of bed and facing the day. The practice of courage is deeply personal, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Practicing courage doesn't mean fear goes away. It means we learn to live alongside it. Fear is a natural part of being human, and it often accompanies the things that matter most to us. The goal isn't to eliminate fear, but to acknowledge it and choose to move forward anyway. Each time we do, we reinforce the belief that we are capable, that we are stronger than our doubts, and that we can handle whatever comes next. In a world that often rewards conformity and perfection, choosing courage is a radical act. It's deciding to live authentically, even when it's hard. It's valuing growth over comfort and truth over approval. It's committing to the messy, beautiful process of being fully alive. Courage is not a destination, it's a practice. It's something we must choose again and again, moment by moment. And the more we choose it, the more natural it becomes. Over time, the small acts of bravery add up, shaping not only how we see ourselves, but also how we move through the world. Practicing courage doesn't make life easier, but it makes it richer, more meaningful, and deeply aligned with who we are. Cultural expectations play a powerful and often insidious role in shaping shame. From the moment we are born, we are immersed in a world of spoken and unspoken rules about who we should be, how we should act, and what is deemed acceptable. These cultural narratives create standards that can feel impossible to meet, particularly for women who are often bombarded with conflicting and unrealistic expectations at every turn. This shame feeds on these cultural messages, embedding them into our sense of self and whispering that if we fall short, we are unworthy. For women, cultural expectations can be overwhelming and contradictory. We're told to be ambitious, but not too ambitious, assertive, but not bossy, nurturing, but not self-sacrificing, attractive, but not vain, independent, but not intimidating. The list is endless. These expectations demand perfection across all areas of life: career, family, appearance, relationships, and set the stage for shame to thrive because perfection is an unattainable standard. When we inevitably fall short of these cultural ideals, shame sweeps in to remind us of our perceived inadequacies. It doesn't just criticize our actions, it attacks our identity. We don't just feel like we made a mistake, we feel like we are the mistake. Cultural expectations create a constant sense of comparison, where no matter how much we achieve or how hard we work, we're left feeling not enough. Appearance is one of the most pervasive arenas where cultural expectations fuel shame. The media bombards us with images of beauty that are airbrushed, filtered, and curated to an impossible standard. These messages tell us that our value is tied to how we look, and any deviation from the ideal, whether it's weight, age, skin tone, or hairstyle, becomes a source of shame. We internalize these messages, spending time, energy, and money trying to meet an ideal that doesn't exist, only to feel inadequate when we inevitably fail. Motherhood is another area where cultural expectations can be especially cruel. Women are expected to be perfect mothers, constantly present, endlessly patient, and entirely selfless. Yet they're also told they must balance this with a thriving career, a strong relationship, and personal fulfillment. The supermom myth leaves no room for mistakes or struggles, and shame ensures that every perceived failure, missing a school event, feeding a child fast food, or taking time for yourself is magnified into a moral failing. Workplaces are not immune to these cultural pressures either. Women are often expected to work harder to prove their worth while navigating stereotypes that penalize them for being too assertive or too accommodating. If they prioritize family, they may be labeled as uncommitted. If they prioritize career, they may be seen as neglectful. Shame feeds on these double standards, leaving women feeling trapped no matter what choices they make. Relationships bring their own set of cultural expectations. Women are told to be nurturing and accommodating, to prioritize others' needs above their own, and to maintain harmony at all costs. This often means suppressing their true feelings or desires to avoid conflict, which can lead to a profound sense of disconnection and shame. The narrative that a woman's worth is tied to her relationships, whether as a partner, mother, or friend, can be particularly damaging, especially for those who don't fit traditional molds or choose different paths. And so the intersection of these cultural expectations is where shame does its deepest work. Women are often pulled in so many directions that meeting all the demands becomes impossible. Yet, instead of recognizing the impossibility of the task, shame convinces us that the failure lies within us. It tells us that we're inadequate, flawed, or broken, reinforcing the very systems that create these harmful standards. What makes cultural shame particularly challenging is how deeply ingrained it is. These expectations aren't just external, they become internalized, shaping how we see ourselves and how we judge others. We carry these messages into our relationships, our workplaces, and our families, perpetuating the cycle of shame unless we consciously work to break it. Breaking free from culturally fueled shame requires awareness and intentionality. It starts with recognizing the unrealistic nature of these expectations and questioning the narratives we've been taught to believe. Who benefits from these ideals? Who profits when we feel unworthy or inadequate? When we begin to see cultural expectations for what they are, constructs designed to control, profit, or maintain power, we can start to loosen their grip on our sense of self. Empathy and connection are powerful tools in this process. When we share our struggles and hear others' stories, we realize that we are not alone in feeling this way. We start to see that the shame we carry isn't personal, it's systemic. And in naming it, we take away some of its power. Rewriting the narrative also involves embracing self-compassion. We must learn to extend the kindness to ourselves that we so readily offer others, recognizing that we are human and that imperfection is part of the journey. By rejecting the cultural script and replacing it with our own values, ones rooted in authenticity, kindness, and connection, we can begin to free ourselves from the grip of shame. Cultural expectations may fuel shame, but they are not immutable. With awareness, empathy, and courage, we can challenge these norms, redefine what matters, and reclaim our sense of worth. When we do, we don't just liberate ourselves, we create space for others to do the same. And in that collective act of defiance, we begin to rewrite the story for future generations. Owning your story is one of the most profound acts of courage and self-liberation. It means embracing every part of who you are, the successes and the failures, the joy and the pain, the triumphs and the struggles, and choosing to stand fully in your truth. For many of us, shame tries to convince us that our stories are too messy, too flawed, or too unworthy to be shared. It tells us to hide the parts of ourselves that don't fit neatly into societal expectations or that make us feel vulnerable. But the moment we choose to own our stories, shame loses its power. Shame thrives in secrecy. It tells us that if anyone truly knew us, our past mistakes, our hidden fears, our moments of weakness, they would reject us. It keeps us stuck in a cycle of self-silencing, where we edit and curate our lives to appear acceptable to others. But in doing so, we lose connection not only with others, but also with ourselves. When we hide parts of our story, we deny the fullness of our humanity. Owning your story is about stepping out of the shadows and reclaiming all the pieces of who you are, even the ones that feel difficult to face. When you own your story, you take back control from shame. Instead of allowing shame to narrate your experiences, twisting them into tales of inadequacy or failure, you become the author. You get to decide how your story is told, what meaning you assign to it, and how it shapes your future. This act of self-authorship is incredibly empowering. It's a declaration that your worth isn't contingent on perfection, that your value doesn't hinge on others' approval, and that your life is yours to define. Owning your story doesn't mean celebrating every chapter. There may be parts of your past that you wish had unfolded differently, decisions you regret, or pain you wish you hadn't experienced. But even these moments hold value. They've shaped who you are, taught you resilience, and provided opportunities for growth. When you own these parts of your story, you acknowledge their place in your journey without letting them define your identity. Say, this happened, but it's not all of who I am. This process requires vulnerability, which can feel terrifying. To own your story, you must be willing to face the parts of yourself that you've tried to hide or disown. It means confronting shame head on and choosing compassion over criticism. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the birthplace of strength and authenticity. When you allow yourself to be seen as you truly are, you open the door to deeper connection and belonging. And while your story isn't finished yet, owning your story also breaks the cycle of comparison. When we don't own our stories, we're more likely to compare our messy realities to the curated lives of others. We see only their highlight reels and assume they've got it all figured out while we're struggling. But when we embrace our own truth, we recognize that everyone has their challenges, insecurities, and untold stories. This perspective fosters empathy, both for ourselves and for others, and helps us move beyond the superficial comparisons that fuel shame. One of the most liberating aspects of owning your story is the freedom it brings. When you stop hiding or apologizing for who you are, you no longer feel trapped by the need to please others or meet impossible standards. You give yourself permission to live authentically, to prioritize what truly matters to you, and to let go of the weight of others' expectations. This doesn't mean you'll never face judgment or criticism, but it does mean that those opinions no longer hold the same power over you. Owning your story also has a ripple effect. When you stand in your truth, you give others permission to do the same. Your courage to be authentic inspires others to embrace their own imperfections and share their own stories. This creates a culture of vulnerability and connection where shame has less room to thrive. By owning your story, you're not just freeing yourself, you're creating space for others to experience freedom too. It's important to remember that owning your story is a practice, not a one-time event. There will be moments when shame tries to creep back in, when you feel tempted to retreat or silence parts of yourself. But each time you choose to stand in your truth, you strengthen your resilience and deepen your sense of self-worth. Nevertheless, it's one of our greatest gifts, so don't shove it down. Owning your story isn't about erasing the hard parts or pretending they didn't happen. It's about integrating them into the larger narrative of who you are. A narrative that includes struggle, but is not defined by it. It's about finding the courage to say, this is my story, and I am proud of who I am because of it. In owning your story, you reclaim your power. You release the hold that shame has on you and step into a life of authenticity, connection, and self-acceptance. You become the storyteller of your life, writing a narrative that is uniquely yours. And in doing so, you find a freedom that cannot be taken away. Shame is universal, but it doesn't have to be permanent. Together as women, we can name it, face it, and strip it of its power. When we choose connection over perfection, courage over hiding, and empathy over judgment, shame doesn't stand a chance. Even for Marilyn Manson, whose career was a ride, even if she didn't want to disclose her gender. So let's rewrite the story. One where we show up as we are, enough, worthy, and unashamed. Thank you.